for Human Rights Watch, Tiseke Kasambala. Very good morning to you and thank you very much for speaking to us. Do you have any hope at all that Nigeria will heed your cause?
Good morning, first of all. Yes, we do hope that Nigeria, as a signatory to the International Criminal Court, will do its duty or will respect its obligation to, either at a minimum, postpone al-Bashir's trip to Nigeria, or, since he's already in the country, arrest him. He is subject to 2 arrest warrants for crimes in the for genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. Nigeria has an obligation to arrest him as an ICC member state.
What happens for you if he doesn't? If it doesn't,
well, yes. Well, if he's not arrested, I think Nigeria will be one of the only, in fact, West African country to have the shameful distinction of welcoming an ICC fugitive into their country. And this is in stark contrast to the leadership of South Africa, Malawi, and other African states who have made it clear that al-Bashir will be arrested if he entered their borders or have avoided having him visit their countries.
Thank you very much for speaking to us. That's Human Rights Watch Tiseke Kasambala. To just give us a little bit of perspective on this, we're on the line now to Southern African Director for Human Rights, or rather we're on the line now to Chair of the African Diplomacy at the University of Johannesburg, Dr. Chris Landsberg. A very good morning to you, Dr. Landsberg.
Thanks for having me.
Just listening to Tiseke Kasambala, they're saying that Nigeria will have the distinction of being the only West African country to not arrest Hassan Omar al-Bashir, but she also spoke about the willingness of Southern African countries to arrest the Sudanese president. Is this the picture? Is this the dialogue that's taking place amongst African leaders? Is there ambivalence? Are there those who believe that he should be arrested and those who say he shouldn't?
Well, what we do know, and I think he is right, certainly from a rhetorical point of view, the new president of Malawi and our own government has said that if President Bashir were to set foot in their countries, they would have no option but to arrest him. In our own country's case, and this is not casting aspersions on our human rights credentials, if he was to come to South Africa, let's say, for example, I mean, the most likely scenario that is likely to happen is if he comes here for, let's say, a UN summit, then all sorts of other international protocols kick in. So just like the United States can't do anything about Robert Mugabe when he goes to the annual UN summit in New York, so he can't do anything about President al-Bashir when he is in New York because it enjoys a different status that time. So it remains to be seen whether we will back up our rhetoric with the reality of arresting him. But in our case, I don't think he will come to South Africa, given that he made that pronouncement. But you ask a more interesting question. This so-called new distinction that Nigeria holds, there's something more significant that's going on. If a country, an African country, a big one at that, an important one, who is very close to the U.S., at least has very cordial relations with the U.S. And other UN Security Council members, if they are willing to do this, then there is an underlying debate going on in Africa that we're going to have to confront. And it seems to me, Tsepiso, where I would disagree with people from Human Rights Watch and other human rights type and legalistic organizations, is that a legal interpretation and solution and way out of this thing is not going to happen. This thing is either going to resolve itself politically, in other words, how do we handle with people who are indicted, or the ICC will die a slow death.
Which is what I really want to get into, because the ICC in its defense says we're not the ones pursuing African leaders as African leaders are charging, but that it's the peoples of these various African countries that are coming to us and using the Rome Statute to ensure that the leaders are indicted. What will be the dialogue going forward? Are African leaders going to review perhaps membership or should I say their submission to the Rome Statute and other like bodies?
Look. We know, for example, that at its most dramatic at the moment, there is the idea being mooted of Africa having to set up its own continental criminal tribunal, if you like, sort of an African version of the ICC. Okay, so what will come of that? I mean, is an open question, and it remains to be seen. But let's be fair to the Africans as far as al-Bashir is concerned. Certainly, former President Mbeki, in his capacity as chief negotiator for the AU over the Sudan crisis, they've never asked for the indictment on President al-Bashir to be rescinded or expunged. They've simply asked for a postponement. So I think what we're having here, at the positive level, you have African countries saying there's a very uncomfortable trade-off between justice and going for justice for people who are indicted, like al-Bashir, and us trying to find political settlements in very tricky situations in Africa.
Let's talk about political settlements then, because there's a tricky situation of Kenya, and we heard the US president when he was here speaking in what would say sort of platitudinal terms about Kenya and what should happen to its leader vis-a-vis the ICC indictment. Is that going to be another conundrum for African leaders?
Okay, yeah, no, it's very interesting. Your guest from Human Rights Watch now said that Nigeria now holds this unique distinction. Remember, there were several African countries who attended President Uhuru's inauguration, so I think that also puts them in a distinction. I mean, first of all, the U.S. itself must answer the question as to why it would not sign up to the Rome Statute, but wouldn't hesitate to go after people like President al-Bashir. And this is not to excuse his excesses. It seems to me that we have to take seriously this notion, even though it's abused by dictators, that the ICC is becoming an anti-African tribunal. In other words, it goes essentially after Africans. But I think there are other options. On the home front, can President Bashir be arrested if he's not going to be arrested by an international government? That's very unlikely to happen. I don't think the ICC is going to disappear. I do think the ICC is going to go into a limbo, and I think the ICC is going to be forced to become a much more pragmatic politically. But that, I have to say, unfortunately, for those with legitimate legal indictments on their head facing them, like President al-Bashir, it's likely to be abused by them.
I suppose
so we're in a bit of a catch-22 here.
It's a conversation we'll have to get deeper into and chat